Judge told Meek Mill to remake a Boyz II Men song and give her a personal shout out, or stay in prison. What you are about to hear is not a rumor. It is not a blog post. It is on the record. Spoken by Meek Mill's own lawyers in sit-down interviews. A judge in Philadelphia held power over one man for over 10 years, and the record shows she used that power in ways that had nothing to do with justice. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what she demanded, exactly what she threatened, and exactly how the highest court in Pennsylvania had to step in and shut it down. This is the story they never told you about the Free Meek movement, and it is worse than you think. The case that never closed. Meek Mill grew up in North Philadelphia, public housing, welfare, no father in the house after he died young. The streets were not a choice. They were the geography. His real name is Robert Meek Williams. He started rapping on corners before anyone knew his name. Dream Chasers was not just an album title. It was a documented climb that thousands of people watched happen in real time from nothing. But before any of that took off, the system got hold of him. November 6th, 2007. Meek Mill is 19 years old, a drug raid. Officer Reginald Graham is the arresting officer. Graham files a report claiming Meek possessed drugs and pointed a gun at police. Meek has said from that day to this day that he never pointed a gun at anyone. He says he was beaten so badly he lost consciousness multiple times. He was hospitalized. Now here is what you need to understand about that officer. Reginald Graham was not a clean cop. His name ended up on an official list compiled by the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office of officers considered too corrupt to put on a witness stand. That list existed for years, and nobody told Meek Mill's defense team about it. This is not a small detail. In the American justice system, when the government knows a key witness has a history of lying under oath, they are required by law to disclose it. That requirement comes from a 1963 United States Supreme Court ruling called Brady versus Maryland. Hiding Graham's name was a Brady violation. The case against Meek Mill was built on a foundation the government already knew was rotten. Meek took a plea. He was 19. He had no resources. He pled guilty and was sentenced to probation beginning in 2008. Most people on probation check in once a week, take a drug test once a month. After a set period, they are done. That is not what happened to Meek Mill. By the time he turned 31, he had been on probation for 12 years. Every concert needed approval. Every trip out of Philadelphia needed approval. Every time he wanted to pick up his son from school after 4 o'clock, he needed to call a probation officer who was not going to answer. And when his legal team started looking closely at that courtroom, they found something that could not be ignored. His lawyer went on record to the Breakfast Club and said this. Here's Meek Mill's own lawyer, speaking directly on record, telling you exactly what this judge was doing.
The issue that we have that we've raised in court filings is we think that Judge Brinkley has taken an unusual interest in his career and has stepped over the line from acting solely as a judge should act and injecting herself into his professional career in ways that are not appropriate.
A judge stepping over the line, injecting herself into a defendant's professional career in ways that are not appropriate. That is not a blog post. That is a court-filed motion being described out loud by the man who wrote it. And the question that motion raised was this. Why was the judge this personally involved in one rapper's life? Chapter 2 is going to answer that. Behind closed doors. By 2017, Meek Mill was one of the biggest rappers in the world. Rock Nation, major tours, millions of fans. But every single move he made required permission from Judge Genece Brinkley, Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas. The same judge on his case since 2008. 9 years and counting, and the longer this went on, the stranger things got. When you are sentenced to probation in Pennsylvania, a probation officer is assigned independently. It is supposed to be random. Judge Brinkley handpicked Meek's probation officer personally, a woman named Ms. Underwood. Judges are not supposed to select probation officers for defendants they are overseeing. She did it anyway. Ms. Underwood was later removed from the case, 18 times on the official court record. Meek Mill was told to leave Rock Nation, Jay-Z's management company, and go back to a manager named Charlie Mack. 18 times, sometimes from the probation officer, sometimes directly from the judge. Charlie Mack was connected to Judge Brinkley. That connection is uncontroverted. It is in the court record, a judge repeatedly pushing a defendant to change his business management to benefit someone connected to her personally. That is not a judicial function. Meek was also ordered to take etiquette classes. He paid $10,000 up front to a company owned by a friend of Charlie Mack. $10,000 to say please and thank you, to a company connected to the same person the judge kept pushing him toward. Then there was the lawyer. A criminal defense attorney named Deborah Rainey was appointed to represent Meek. Rainey visited him once in jail, never showed up in court. And it came out that Deborah Rainey was Judge Brinkley's own personal lawyer. A judge arranged for her own personal lawyer to represent the defendant she was sentencing. And then there was the homeless shelter. Judge Brinkley was on sick leave, not supposed to be working, not supposed to be anywhere near Meek's case. And yet she showed up in person at the homeless shelter where Meek was doing court-ordered community service. She watched him. She interacted with him Ask any judge in America if they have ever done that. The answer will always be no. But nothing prepared Meek or his team for what happened next. Judge Brinkley called Meek into her private chambers. No court reporter, no transcript, no lawyers present. Just the judge, Meek Mill, and his then girlfriend, Nicki Minaj. What happened in that room was later reported by both Meek and Nicki independently. They both told the same story. And Meek's lawyer, Joe Tacopina, went on camera and described exactly what they said happened. Here is Joe Tacopina, Meek Mill's attorney, speaking directly on camera about what the judge said inside those chambers.
That the judge had made a request of Meek to remake a Boyz II Men song, Charlie Mack's band, by the way, Boyz II Men song, On Bending Knees, and to give a shout out to the judge in the song. And Meek thought, and Nicki as well, thought they were, being, subject to a joke or that the judge was kidding. And when they left, the judge said, "I'm serious." And Meek refused that request. He said, "It's not what I do. That's not my genre." And she then said, "Shoot yourself."
A sitting judge in her private chambers asking a defendant to remake a Boyz II Men song called On Bended Knee and give her a personal shout out in the song. When Meek and Nicki laughed, thinking it was a joke, the judge said, "I am serious." Meek refused, and she said, "Suit yourself, suit yourself." 2 words from a judge to a man whose freedom she controlled. Chapter 3, you're going to find out what happened when the world finally found out. System fought back. November 6th, 2017. Exactly 10 years to the day from his original arrest. Meek Mill stood in a Philadelphia courtroom for a probation violation hearing. The violation was not a new crime. He was late to a meeting. He rode a dirt bike in New York City. 2 incidents, no new criminal conviction. The prosecutor said no jail time. The probation officer said no jail time. Both told Judge Brinkley that Meek had been compliant, that he deserved to stay free. Judge Brinkley sentenced him to 2 to 4 years in state prison anyway. Philadelphia erupted. Protests outside the courthouse on November 7th, 2017. Rallies every Friday. People standing in the rain holding Free Meek signs for a man many of them had never met. Meek's legal team filed a motion for recusal, asking Judge Brinkley to remove herself from the case. They laid out everything: the Charlie Mack demands, the hand-picked probation officer, the etiquette classes, the chambers meeting, the Boyz II Men request, all of it in writing. Judge Brinkley sat on that motion for 2.5 months, while Meek Mill sat in prison and said nothing. Then the FBI got involved. Meek's legal team filed a motion referencing contact between the FBI and Judge Brinkley regarding her conduct. The details were sealed, but the motion confirmed it happened. The Federal Bureau of Investigation was looking at a sitting Philadelphia judge because of how she handled this case. And then the Pennsylvania Supreme Court moved. April 24, 2018, the highest court in Pennsylvania issued one order: release Meek Mill on bail immediately. Here's Meek Mill himself, speaking directly, describing exactly what happened.
The mayor's visiting you, the DA said, yes, we agree, he should be out, and then it was just the judge, right, that kept you in?
I actually was released by like a 3-judge panel, I think it was, in Supreme Court.
They went over her.
Yeah, that's the highest state court you could go to.
The mayor, the governor, the district attorney, the highest court in Pennsylvania, all on one side, and one judge on the other. Meek walked out of SC Chester that same day, got in a helicopter, flew to the Wells Fargo Center, and walked out in front of a sold-out Philadelphia 76ers crowd. July 24th, 2019. The Pennsylvania Superior Court vacated Meek Mill's conviction entirely. 12 years of probation, 2 stints in prison, all of it built on the testimony of a corrupt officer the district attorney's own office knew was lying. And Judge Genece Brinkley was removed from the case permanently. Now here is my opinion, and I want you to really sit with this. Meek Mill had Jay-Z, he had Michael Rubin, he had Joe Tacopina, he had the governor of Pennsylvania speaking on his behalf. He had all of that. And it still took him 12 years and 2 prison sentences to get free from 1 judge in 1 Philadelphia courtroom. What happens to the person who has none of that? What happens to the 19-year-old from North Philly with no famous friends and no lawyers? That person is still inside right now. No documentary, no hashtag, no helicopter to a basketball game. That is not just Meek Mill's story, that is America's story. And Meek Mill just happened to be famous enough for us to see it. The Pennsylvania Superior Court officially vacated Meek Mill's conviction on July 24th, 2019. After finding that the case was built on the testimony of a corrupt officer the government had hidden from the defense for over a decade. Meek Mill spent 12 years of his life from age 19 to age 31 under the control of 1 judge who the record shows was using that control for personal reasons. And the question I want to leave you with is this. If it took a superstar with a global movement behind him 12 years to expose 1 corrupt judge in 1 city, how many people without a platform are still waiting for someone to notice?